I used to believe every love story had a moment when time stopped, when two people looked at each other and silently knew they had found the place they belonged. For me, that moment was Emily. The first time I saw her smile, I felt something I couldn't name, something fierce and terrifyingly tender. She had that effect on me, like light streaming through a cracked window into a dark room. When we married, I thought the world had given me a gift it would never take back. Our wedding was simple, but her laughter filled every corner of that small church, echoing in my chest long after the vows. I remember thinking, this is it. This is all I'll ever need. Our first year together was painted in the soft colors of domestic bliss. Mornings smelled of coffee and warm toast, evenings of candlelight and whispered jokes. We built routines like secret rituals only we understood. Her humming while she watered the plants, the way I left notes under her pillow, her habit of leaving the porch light on when I worked late. Small, ordinary things, but they stitched us closer than any grand gesture ever could. I'd come home from long shifts to find Emily waiting, her face lighting up as if the world stopped just for my return. Some nights we'd sit in silence, her hand resting on mine, and I thought silence had never felt so alive. In those moments, I told myself we were unbreakable, but perfection is fragile. So fragile that you rarely notice the first fracture until it's already spreading. It started with little things. Emily would pause when I asked how her day was, as though choosing her words too carefully. She began staying up later than me, sitting by the window with her phone glowing against her face. I told myself it was nothing, just a phase, the natural drift of two people settling into routine. But sometimes, in the half-dark, I'd wake to find her staring off into the night, her expression unreadable. I wanted to believe we were still the couple who danced barefoot in the kitchen, who whispered promises into the soft folds of pillows. Yet a sliver of unease had lodged itself in me, sharp and quiet. There was one night I can't forget. We were curled on the couch watching an old movie. Emily leaned her head against my shoulder, her warmth pressing close, but her eyes never left the flickering screen. I whispered, "You okay?" She smiled, but it was the kind of smile you give strangers, polite, detached, distant. For the first time, I felt like an outsider in my own marriage. Still, I clung to hope. I told myself, love was stronger than shadows, that every couple had silent battles no one else could see. I ignored the pit in my stomach, the unanswered questions, the way her laughter sometimes sounded rehearsed, because to admit something was wrong would mean shattering the perfect beginning I had built in my mind. And so I held on, blind, determined, and quietly afraid. Looking back, I realized perfection was never real. It was a story I told myself, a story I wanted so desperately to believe. But stories, no matter how beautifully told, can't hide the truth forever. The truth was already creeping in, slow, quiet, and merciless. And soon, it would no longer whisper. The cracks that began as quiet suspicions soon became whispers I could no longer ignore. At first, it was just the faint sound of Emily's voice drifting through the hallway late at night. I'd wake to the empty space beside me, the sheets still warm, and hear her speaking in hushed tones from the kitchen. The clock would glow past midnight, sometimes past 1, her words low and careful, too careful. When I asked about it the next morning, she brushed it off with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Just a friend from work," she said. "You know how hospital shifts mess with schedules." She was a nurse after all, and I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that the woman who once fell asleep mid-conversation, curled against me, was still mine entirely. But the calls continued. I told myself I was being paranoid, but the unease inside me kept growing, like a splinter working deeper, beneath the skin. I tried to sleep through it, but my ears sharpened to every sound, the creak of the floorboards, the soft hum of her voice, the sudden stop when she sensed movement. Sometimes I'd catch fragments, just enough to drive me mad. "I can't talk now, he's here tomorrow night maybe." We began arguing over little things, though neither of us admitted the real reason. Dishes left unwashed, lights left on, money spent without telling the other. Each quarrel felt like a rehearsal for something larger, something inevitable. One evening, I finally confronted her. "Who's calling you at midnight, Emily?" I asked, trying to sound calm though my heart hammered in my chest. Her eyes flicked toward me, sharp and defensive. "Why are you listening? Do you not trust me?" "It's not about trust," I said. "It's about honesty. Couples don't hide things like this," she scoffed, folding her arms. "You're making a big deal out of nothing. Do you want to control every part of my life? Is that it?" Her words cut deeper than I expected. Control. As if my concern was a weapon. As if love was something toxic. I didn't know if she believed what she was saying or if she just wanted me to. Either way, it worked. I found myself apologizing, retreating, swallowing my doubts. But her phone kept glowing at night. One Saturday, I tried to surprise her. I pretended to fall asleep, waited until her breathing grew restless, and then followed her downstairs. She was in the kitchen, whispering fiercely into the phone, her back turned. The light above cast her shadow across the tiles, tall and distorted, like a stranger had invaded my house. "Emily," I said softly. She jumped, nearly dropping the phone. Her face flushed with panic before smoothing into composure. "Daniel, you scared me," she said, slipping the device into her pocket. "Who was that?" "No one, just Lisa from the ward." Her voice trembled for a fraction of a second, and that tremor told me more than any words could. I wanted to grab the phone, to force the truth out of her, but something stopped me. Maybe it was fear. Fear of what I might actually find. Because, deep down, I already knew these weren't innocent conversations. Instead, I walked back upstairs, leaving her standing in the kitchen, bathed in cold fluorescent light. My chest felt hollow, as if the house itself had expelled its warmth. That night, lying awake beside her, I stared at the ceiling and realized trust was no longer something I could offer freely. It had to be earned back, piece by piece. But Emily didn't seem interested in rebuilding anything. The whispers behind closed doors had become louder than our love. And though I tried to convince myself otherwise, I knew this was only the beginning. Something darker was moving beneath the surface, and soon I would see the stranger in her eyes. After weeks of late-night calls and excuses I could no longer swallow, I started noticing other changes. Small things at first, subtle enough to dismiss if I wanted to keep lying to myself. But the human heart knows when something is slipping away, and mine felt like it was losing Emily piece by piece. Her phone lit up with messages she wouldn't let me see. I'd glance at her across the room and catch the faintest smile curling at her lips. Private secret, not meant for me. When I asked, she shrugged it off. Just a funny meme from a coworker, she'd say. But it wasn't just laughter in her eyes. It was something else, a glow I couldn't recognize anymore. And then there was the perfume. One evening she returned home smelling faintly of sandalwood and musk, a scent that didn't belong to her. Emily's fragrance had always been soft vanilla, jasmine, something gentle and familiar. This was sharper, foreign, lingering on her clothes long after she changed. When I asked, she smiled too quickly and claimed it was from a patient's family member who hugged her at work. The explanation rang false, brittle as glass. Her lies grew clumsy. She said she was meeting friends but couldn't name who. She claimed she worked extra shifts, yet her paycheck never changed. Each excuse carved another mark into my chest. Still, part of me clung to denial, because to accept the truth meant admitting my perfect beginning was already dead. Paranoia crept into my daily life. I found myself studying her more closely, watching her fingers as they danced across her phone, observing how her tone shifted when she answered certain calls. Her laughter grew rarer with me, yet more frequent with the unseen presence on the other side of that glowing screen. One night I decided I couldn't take the guessing anymore. Emily told me she was meeting a friend after work. Instead of confronting her, I followed. My car crawled behind hers through dimly lit streets, my pulse drumming in my ears. She pulled into a quiet neighborhood cafe I didn't know she liked. I parked far enough not to be seen, my hands trembling. On the steering wheel, through the glass, I saw her. She wasn't alone. Across the table sat a man I had never seen before, tall, confident, his posture easy. He leaned forward as if every word from her lips was precious. Emily smiled at him, a smile I hadn't seen in months. It wasn't forced or polite. It was radiant. My chest burned. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. I watched her reach across the table, brushing his hand with hers. The gesture was small, fleeting, but it gutted me all the same. I stayed there, for nearly an hour, watching them laugh, watching her transform into someone unrecognizable. The woman I loved, the woman I thought I knew, was gone, replaced by a stranger whose eyes sparkled for someone else. When she finally drove home, I followed again, silent, hidden. She slipped into the house as if nothing had happened, kissed my cheek like routine, and asked how my evening was. I wanted to scream, to throw her betrayal in her face, but instead, I swallowed the poison and said, it was fine. That night, lying beside her, I stared into the darkness and wondered if I was losing my mind. Maybe I had imagined the way she touched his hand. Maybe the smile was harmless. Maybe I was creating shadows where there were none. But deep down, I knew. The stranger I had seen in her eyes wasn't my imagination. It was the truth I had tried so hard to avoid, and soon those cracks between us would shatter into something violent. The image of Emily's smile across that cafe table haunted me all night. It replayed in my mind like a cruel film loop, the tilt of her head, the way her eyes softened for him. By morning, my chest felt raw, and I knew I couldn't keep pretending. When she walked into the kitchen, pouring herself coffee as if nothing had changed, I finally spoke. "Where were you last night, Emily?" My voice came out steady, though my hands trembled against the table. She froze for half a second, then recovered with a casual shrug. "I told you, I was out with a friend." I leaned forward. "Which friend?" "Because I followed you." Her head snapped up, eyes wide. "You what?" "I saw you," I said, each word dragging across my throat. "At the cafe, with him." For a long moment, silence pressed between us, thick and suffocating. Then she laughed, a sharp, disbelieving sound. "Daniel, do you hear yourself? You're spying on me now. Don't twist this." My voice cracked with anger. "I saw you holding his hand. You imagined it." Her tone hardened, cold steel beneath the laughter. "Do you even realize how paranoid you sound, following me like some jealous teenager? That's not love, Daniel. That's obsession." My chest burned. "I'm obsessed because you're lying. To me, who is he?" She set her mug down with deliberate calm, though her fingers trembled. "He's just a coworker. We were talking about work, that's all. God, you always overthink everything. Don't lie to me." Her eyes narrowed. "Maybe if you trusted me, I wouldn't need to talk to someone else. Did you ever think of that?" The words struck harder than a slap. I felt the room tilt, my certainty wobbling under the weight of her accusation. Was I the problem? Had I pushed her away without realizing it? But then I remembered her smile, the warmth she reserved only for him. "No," I said, shaking my head. "This isn't about trust. It's about honesty. You've been distant for weeks. Late calls, secrets, perfume that isn't yours. I'm not blind." Emily's voice rose, sharp and furious. "You want to know the truth? Fine. You've become impossible, Daniel. Always watching, always questioning, like I'm guilty before. I even open my mouth. Do you know how exhausting that is? Maybe I need someone else to talk to, someone who doesn't suffocate me." Her words ripped through me, leaving a hollow ache. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Then rage surged up, hot and wild. "So you admit it. There is someone else." She flinched but held her ground. "I didn't say that. You're putting words in my mouth again like you always do." I slammed my hand against the table, the sound echoing through the kitchen. "Stop lying to me." Her eyes glistened, but instead of breaking, she pressed forward, voice shaking with venom. "You're losing your mind, Daniel, and you're dragging me down with you. Do you want to ruin this marriage? Because that's where we're heading if you keep this up." I stared at her, my breathing ragged, the air heavy with the smell of burnt coffee. For the first time, I saw her clearly. Not the woman I fell in love with, but someone colder, someone who could twist truth into a blade and drive it straight into me. And yet, when the silence settled, I found myself whispering, "I just want." Back, she turned away, shoulders rigid, and muttered, "Then stop accusing me." But deep down, I knew the crack in the glass couldn't be mended. It was only a matter of time before it shattered completely. After our fight, the silence in the house became unbearable. Emily moved around me like a ghost, offering only clipped responses and distant glances. She spoke less, smiled less, but kept her phone close, always face down, always locked with a new passcode I didn't know. The mistrust gnawed at me. I tried to convince myself to let it go, to accept her words and bury my doubts, but the memory of that man's hand beneath hers refused to fade. Every time she left the house, I felt the ground beneath me shift, as if she were walking further and further from our life together. So I did what I told myself was necessary. I began watching her in ways she couldn't see. It started small. One night while she showered, I unlocked her laptop, telling myself I was only looking for reassurance. But reassurance never came. Instead, I found emails hastily deleted, though fragments remained in the trash folder. Messages from an account named A. Cole. They weren't overtly intimate, but the phrasing struck me like needles. "Same time tomorrow?" "I can't stop thinking about what you said." I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Who was A. Cole? Why did his name sound familiar? When I heard the bathroom door creak, I closed the laptop and forced myself into bed, my heart hammering like I had committed a crime. She slipped under the sheets without a word, damp hair smelling faintly of lavender. I wanted to ask, to demand the truth, but the fear of hearing it kept my mouth sealed. Days later, I checked our shared credit card statements. Buried among groceries and gas charges were receipts from places I had never been with her. Restaurants. Across town, a boutique hotel billed for conference room use. My chest tightened as I traced the dates. They aligned perfectly with the nights she claimed to be working late. I told myself there had to be another explanation. But deep down, I already knew there wasn't. The more I searched, the darker the rabbit hole became. I installed a tracking app on her phone while she slept, my hands shaking as I pressed through the setup screens. Guilt coiled inside me, but desperation drowned it out. If she was going to keep secrets, I would rip them into the light. The first time I checked her location, she was exactly where she said she'd be, at the hospital. Relief washed through me, only to sour into shame. Maybe I really was paranoid. Maybe Emily was right about me losing control. But then came the next night. She kissed my cheek, said she was covering a late shift, and drove off. My phone buzzed. 30 minutes later, her tracker placing her nowhere near the hospital. Instead, she was parked at a high-end restaurant across the city. For 2 hours, she stayed there, unmoving. I sat at home staring at the glowing red dot on the screen, my throat dry, my knuckles white around the phone. Every instinct screamed, to get in the car, to storm into that restaurant, to drag the truth out of her in front of everyone. But I stayed frozen, paralyzed between rage and fear. When she finally returned that night, she smelled of that same sandalwood perfume, stronger than ever. She slipped into bed beside me, whispering, "Long shift," before turning away. I watched her back in the darkness, my mind spiraling. The fragments were piling up, emails, receipts, locations, but none of it formed the complete picture. I had evidence of betrayal, but no proof of the full extent. It was like holding shards of broken glass, enough to cut me, not enough to see the whole reflection. Still, one name repeated in every corner I searched, Adrian Cole. I didn't know who he was yet, but I knew he was real. Real enough to steal Emily's smiles, her time, her warmth. Real enough to make me a stranger in my own marriage, and soon I promised myself I would find him. The name clung to my mind like a thorn. Adrian Cole. I couldn't escape it. It was in her emails, her receipts, whispered in fragments of late-night calls. Whoever he was, he had become the ghost haunting my marriage. I needed to know if he was flesh and blood or just my paranoia shaping shadows into men. So I began to dig. At first, all I had was a name and a few digital traces. A search through the hospital's public website revealed him. Dr. Adrian Cole, chief of surgery. His face stared back at me from a polished headshot. Strong jawline, dark hair perfectly styled, a confident smile that made my stomach churn. He looked like the kind of man people trusted instantly, the kind of man who filled a room without effort. I told myself he was just another doctor Emily worked with. But deep down, I knew better. I started noticing details I'd overlooked. The way Emily's wardrobe had subtly shifted. New dresses, higher heels, lipstick in shades she never wore for me. She left for work earlier, stayed out later, brushing off questions with rehearsed ease. Extra rounds, she'd say. Paperwork. But the perfume on her lingered longer than any paperwork ever could. The more I thought about Adrian, the more he grew into something monstrous in my mind. I imagined him leaning too close when they talked, his hand grazing hers as he guided her through hospital corridors. I imagined his voice low, assuring her of things I never could. Each thought twisted tighter around my chest until breathing felt like a struggle. One evening, I drove to the hospital parking lot, waiting in the shadows like a man I no longer recognized. My hands gripped the steering wheel, sweat slicking my palms. Hours passed, cars pulled in and out, and I questioned what I was even doing. Then I saw them. Emily emerged from the hospital doors, her laugh carrying faintly across the lot. Beside her walked Adrian Cole. He wasn't in scrubs but a sharp tailored suit, his jacket slung casually over one arm. His posture was relaxed, his smile wide, as if he owned the night. Emily's expression gutted me. Bright, unguarded, the same smile that used to belong only to me. She looked alive in a way she hadn't in months. They stopped near his car, their conversation too quiet for me to hear. He leaned in, close enough that his breath must have brushed her cheek. Emily didn't pull away. Instead, she lowered her eyes, a blush rising on her face I hadn't seen in years. My vision blurred with rage. My hands ached to pound the steering wheel, to explode out of the car and demand answers. But I couldn't move. I sat frozen, a spectator to my own humiliation. Adrian reached for her hand. It was only for a moment. Brief, fleeting, but it was enough. Enough to confirm every suspicion that had poisoned me for weeks. Emily didn't resist. Something inside me cracked then, sharp and irreparable. I had seen the truth with my own eyes. No gaslighting, no denial, no twisted words could erase what I had witnessed. And yet, even as fury boiled inside me, I felt something else creep in. Fear. Because now Adrian wasn't just a shadow in my head. He was real. He had a name, a face, and worst of all, a place in Emily's heart. I gripped the steering wheel, tighter, forcing myself to breathe, forcing myself not to act on the violence screaming through my veins. This wasn't the moment to confront her, not yet, but soon, very soon. I couldn't carry the silence anymore. After seeing her with Adrian, the memory clawed at me like broken glass buried under skin. Every time Emily walked into the room, every time she touched her phone, every time she smiled without me being. The cause, I felt the truth searing through me. That evening when she came home later than usual, I waited in the kitchen. The lights were dim, the air thick with the smell of reheated leftovers she had missed at dinner. She set her purse on the counter, humming softly, as if she were still glowing from someone else's company. "Emily," I said, my voice steady, but razor sharp. "We need to talk." She froze for the briefest moment, then turned, wearing that same polite smile that had begun to feel like a mask. "About what?" I leaned forward, my fists tight against the table. "Adrian Cole." The name hung heavy in the room, slicing through the air like a blade. Her expression faltered, just for a heartbeat, before she forced a laugh. "You've been digging again, haven't you? God, Daniel, this obsession is destroying us. Don't lie." My voice cracked, raw and trembling. "I saw you. I saw the way you looked at him, the way he touched your hand. That wasn't work, Emily. That wasn't innocent." Her lips parted, ready with another excuse, but something shifted in her eyes. She exhaled slowly, her shoulders sinking, as if the weight of pretense had grown too heavy. "You want the truth?" she asked quietly. The silence between us roared. My chest tightened. "Yes." She met my gaze, unflinching. "Fine. Yes, Daniel, I've been seeing him." The words hollowed me out. My knees felt weak, my stomach turning as if the floor had given way. Still, I clung to a sliver of hope, desperate for some explanation that could soften the blow. "Why?" My voice was a whisper, barely audible. "Do you love him?" Her answer came fast, almost rehearsed. "No, it's not love. It was never about that." I stared at her, unable to comprehend. "Then what was it?" Her jaw tightened and her eyes glistened, but her tone cut sharp. "It was escape, a distraction. You suffocate me, Daniel. You watch me, question me, trap me. With Adrian, I could breathe." The words twisted like knives, each syllable cutting deeper. I felt myself unraveling, anger surging up through heartbreak. "Escape?" I spat. "Is that what our marriage is to you? A prison?" She flinched but didn't look away. "Sometimes, yes." Rage boiled over. I slammed my fist against the table, the sound reverberating through the kitchen. "We made vows, Emily. Do those mean nothing to you?" Her face hardened, tears brimming but unshed. "They meant something once, but people change. You've changed." "No," I snapped, my voice breaking. "You did." The silence that followed was unbearable. I searched her face for the woman I married, the one who once looked at me like I was her world. But all I saw was distance, cold and unyielding. Finally, she whispered, "I never meant to hurt you." The words were hollow, meaningless. If she hadn't meant to hurt me, she wouldn't have shattered everything we built. I staggered back, breath ragged, vision blurred with rage and grief. "You already did," I said. For a moment, I thought I saw regret flicker in her eyes, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a weary calm, as though she had been waiting for this confrontation and was relieved it was over. I left the kitchen before the rage inside me could spill into something irreversible. Upstairs, in the darkness of our bedroom, I pressed my palms to my face, shaking. The vows we once whispered under stained glass and candlelight echoed cruelly in my head, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, but no vow had prepared me for betrayal. And now, with the truth exposed, I felt the cracks within me widen into something dangerous, something I couldn't control. The night, after Emily's confession, stretched endlessly, each hour bleeding into the next like ink spreading across paper. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my body frozen but my mind unraveling in jagged loops. Her words replayed, over and over. Escape, distraction, suffocating. They clawed at me until I couldn't tell if I was reliving her betrayal or inventing. New wounds in my head. By morning, I didn't recognize myself. My reflection in the bathroom mirror looked hollow, eyes rimmed in red, jaw tight from clenching through the night. I poured whiskey into my coffee mug, my hands trembling, convincing myself it would take the edge off. By noon, I was on my second glass. The house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a trap. Every corner whispered memories of us. The living room, where we danced on our anniversary. The hallway where she kissed me after long days. The kitchen where we shared secrets in the dark. But now those spaces mocked me, turning love into cruelty. The walls closed in tighter with each drink, suffocating me in reminders of what she had stolen away. I began hearing her voice in empty rooms. At first, just a murmur, Emily laughing faintly like she used to when I told her a bad joke. Then sharper sounds, a whisper of my name, the click of her heels on the wooden floor. I would stumble from room to room, chasing shadows only to find silence. My chest pounded with both terror and rage. By the third night, hallucinations became conversations. I sat at the dining table, a bottle half drained beside me, staring at the chair across from me, and then I saw her. Not flesh and blood, but a cruel imitation conjured by my fractured mind. "Why, Emily?" I croaked, my voice slurred. Why wasn't I enough? The phantom smiled, cold and taunting. Because you were too much. Always. Watching. Always controlling. I slammed the bottle down, shattering glass across the table. Liar! I shouted, my voice echoing through the empty house. My hands bled from the shards, but I felt nothing except the fire inside me, the gnawing certainty that she had destroyed me on purpose. Sleep became impossible. When I closed my eyes, I saw them together. Emily and Adrian, their bodies entwined, her smile brighter than anything she'd ever given me. I would wake drenched in sweat, fists clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. During the day, I wandered the house in circles, muttering to myself. The photos on the walls became unbearable, her face frozen in laughter, her arms wrapped around me in moments that now felt like lies. One by one, I tore them down, smashing frames, leaving glass littered on the floor. The house transformed into a battlefield of memories. Every door creaked with accusation. Every window seemed to. Watch me, a jury of glass and shadows. I began to see it not as a home, but as a prison. Its walls echoing with betrayal, its rooms dripping with ghosts of vows she had broken. And in that prison, a dangerous thought took root. If Emily could betray me so easily, if Adrian could steal, what was mine without consequence? Then why should I suffer alone? Why should they get to walk freely while I drowned in pain? The idea struck like lightning, terrifying and exhilarating. My breath quickened, heart hammering, as visions of violent confrontations flickered through my mind. Confrontations where I wasn't the victim anymore. I poured another drink, but my hands were steady now. For the first time in weeks, clarity burned through the haze. I could almost hear my own voice, calm and deliberate. This ends when I decide. It ends. As I stared out the window into the night, the reflection of my hollow face staring back, I realized I had crossed a line. The man I once was, the husband who believed in love, in vows, in forgiveness, was gone. What remained was something darker, something dangerous. And I knew, with chilling certainty, that the next time I faced Emily and Adrian, it wouldn't just be words between us. The night it happened, the air itself felt charged, thick, restless, like a storm about to break. I hadn't slept in days. My mind was a swarm of jagged thoughts, all circling one undeniable truth. Something had to give. The bottle of whiskey sat half empty on the counter, but I didn't need it anymore. Clarity, sharp and merciless, had already taken hold. Emily came home later than usual, her keys rattling against the lock, her heels clicking on the wooden floor. The sound, once comforting, now cut through me like glass. She stepped into the living room where I waited in the dark. "Daniel?" she called softly, sensing something off. I rose slowly, the shadows clinging to me. "Where were you?" My voice was low, steady, but every muscle in me was taut, vibrating with restrained fury. She sighed, setting her purse down. "Not this. Again. I told you I had a late shift at the hospital." "A late shift with Adrian?" I asked, stepping closer. Her shoulders stiffened, her silence answering louder than any words could. The room shrank around us. My heart pounded like a drum, echoing in my ears. "Do you even remember the vows you made to me?" I hissed. "Or were those lies too?" Her eyes flashed, defiant. "You're paranoid, Daniel. You've been spiraling, drinking, losing yourself. Don't put this on me." That word, paranoid, ignited something deep inside. My hands trembled, not from weakness, but from the unbearable weight of betrayal pressing against my chest. "Don't you dare turn this back on me," I growled, stepping closer until only inches separated us. "I gave you everything, Emily, and you threw it away for him." Her face hardened, but I saw fear flicker in her eyes. She tried to move past me toward the hallway, but I blocked her. "Daniel, stop," she said, her voice sharper now. This isn't you." But it was me. Or maybe it was what she had made of me. This fractured version, sharpened by pain, stripped of trust. The argument escalated like dry wood catching fire. Our words became weapons, hurled across the room with enough force to shatter what little remained between us. She shouted that I was suffocating her. I shouted that she had destroyed me. The air crackled with rage and desperation, until finally, words weren't enough. In the chaos, she grabbed her phone from the table, her fingers trembling as she dialed. I lunged forward, knocking it from her hand. It clattered across the hardwood, buzzing with unanswered calls, the screen flashing Adrian's name. Something inside me snapped. I don't remember the exact moment the glass shattered. I only remember the sound, the piercing crack as the wine glass she had left on the counter exploded against the floor, shards scattering like tiny stars. In the blur, I saw her face pale with shock, heard her sharp intake of breath, and then silence. My hands were red. My chest heaved. Emily lay crumpled against the side of the table, her eyes wide with disbelief, her lips trembling as though words had been stolen from her. No, 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 no. My voice broke as I dropped to my knees beside her. The world had gone utterly still, except for the faint hum of the phone still vibrating against the floor. Her blood spread slowly, a dark crimson stain against the pale wood, thick and irreversible. I pressed my hands against the wound, begging, pleading. "Stay with me, Emily. Please, please, I didn't mean—" Her gaze flickered to mine, a mix of fear, sorrow, and something else I couldn't name. Her lips parted, but no sound came, and then her body slackened, her eyes glassing over with the finality of silence. The room around me collapsed into an unbearable void. The buzzing phone stopped. The broken glass glistened under the dim light like cruel jewels. And I was left kneeling in a pool of her blood, my breath ragged, my heart tearing itself apart in my chest. The silence that followed was heavier than any scream. It pressed into me, suffocating, wrapping itself around my throat until I could barely breathe. For a long moment, I didn't move. I couldn't. My mind replayed the last words, the last fight, the last glimpse of life in her eyes. And then, slowly, the reality set in. There was no undoing this. No rewinding time, no waking from this nightmare. Emily was gone, and all that remained was blood on the floor. The silence didn't last. Never does. At first, it was just the ringing in my ears, the kind that follows destruction, as though the universe itself was trying to warn me of what I'd done. Then came the sound of distant voices, neighbors maybe, stirred by the crash of glass and the shouts that must have carried through the thin walls. I sat frozen beside Emily, my hands sticky with her blood, my body trembling but rooted to the floor. And then, like a cruel reminder that the world hadn't ended with her last breath, the wail of sirens split the night. Blue and red lights washed across the living room window, flashing over the shattered glass, the spilled wine, the lifeless shape of the woman I had once promised forever to. My heart slammed against my ribs as footsteps thundered up the path, followed by fists pounding on the door. "Police! Open up!" I couldn't move. My body refused to respond, as though it too had died here on this blood-stained floor. The door burst open anyway, splintering under the force, and suddenly the house was no longer mine. Uniformed officers flooded in, their shouts overlapping in a storm of command and urgency. "Hands where we can see them. Step back, move away from her." But I couldn't. My hands clung to Emily, pressed against her as if I could still hold her here, still anchor her to this world. It took 2 officers to drag me back, my nails scraping against the wood as I screamed her name, again and again, until my voice cracked. Paramedics swarmed around her, but I saw in their eyes what I already knew. Their movements were procedural, detached, carrying the weight of inevitability. After a few frantic moments, one of them looked up at the lead officer and shook his head. "Time of death." His voice faded under the weight of finality. My knees buckled. I would have collapsed if not for the officers gripping my arms like vices. The neighbors had gathered outside, their faces pale in the strobing lights. I caught fragments of whispers as I was led out in handcuffs. Wasn't she the teacher? The one everyone loved? They looked so happy. I never would have guessed. He killed her. God, he killed her. The words clung to me like barbs. He killed her, over and over, echoing louder than the sirens, louder than my own frantic heartbeat. Inside the police car, the world blurred past in streaks of neon. I pressed my forehead against the cold glass, trying to breathe, but the air felt thick with judgment. Every flash of a camera from the crowd, every murmured speculation carved into me another layer of shame. By morning, the story had already escaped the walls of our home. The headlines spread like wildfire, plastered across news outlets and whispered through every corner of town. The perfect couple turned nightmare. Photographs of our wedding day reappeared online. Emily's smile radiant, my arm around her, the illusion of happiness immortalized in pixels. Side by side with those images were shots of our house swarmed with police, of me being led away in restraints, my face hollow, eyes bloodshot. The contrast was cinematic, grotesque. Investigators descended on every corner of our lives, dissecting our marriage piece by piece. They took my phone, her phone, the laptop. They sifted through emails, call logs, bank receipts. They spoke to friends, colleagues, neighbors, anyone who could help them trace the path from the bright beginning to the bloody end. But none of them knew the whole truth. None of them had lived inside the suffocating silence, the whispers behind. Closed doors, the endless spiral of paranoia and betrayal. All they saw was the surface, the tidy narrative of a man who snapped, a woman who strayed, and a tragedy that sold papers. In the holding cell, I stared at the gray concrete walls and wondered how long it would take for the world to forget us. But deep down I knew they wouldn't. We had become a story, one that people couldn't stop retelling. The husband, the wife, the doctor, the affair, the fight, the blood. And somewhere, beyond these bars, Adrian was still out there, untouched, unpunished. The thought simmered in the back of my mind, a bitter ember refusing to die. The silence was gone now, replaced by the roar of the world demanding answers. And I knew, as the days stretched before me, that this was not the end of the story. It was only the beginning of what came after. The cell was silent, but the silence here was different from the silence at home. It wasn't thick with memories or haunted by Emily's perfume. It was hollow, institutional, made of concrete and metal. Still, it gnawed at me the same way. I sat on the narrow bench, my hands clasped together, staring at the cracks in the floor as if they could tell me how everything had come to this. When the guard opened the door and told me it was time, my legs moved like they belonged to someone else. The interrogation room was colder than the cell. A single bulb hung above the table, its glow harsh, throwing shadows across the walls like a scene from a film I never wanted to star in. I sat, the cuffs clinking against the chair, and waited. Detective. Harris entered first, his expression firm but not cruel. Behind him came Detective Ruiz, who carried a folder so thick it seemed to hold the weight of my entire marriage. They sat across from me, eyes steady, waiting for me to break the silence. "Daniel," Harris began, voice low, deliberate. "You know why you're here. This is your chance to explain, to tell us in your own words what happened. Explain." The word sounded absurd. How could I possibly condense years of devotion, suspicion, betrayal, and rage into something neat enough to fit into their notes? Still, I tried. "I didn't mean for it to happen," I whispered, my throat tight. "I swear to you, I didn't wake up that morning planning to—" My voice cracked. "To kill her." Ruiz flipped open the folder. "We have evidence of the fights. Neighbors reported shouting for weeks. You tracked her phone, read her emails. You followed her, Daniel. You were obsessed." I flinched. "Wouldn't you be? If the woman you loved was slipping away? If every smile, every touch felt like a lie?" Harris leaned forward, his eyes softening for the first time. "Tell us about Adrian Cole." Even the sound of his name burned. I let out a bitter laugh, more hollow than amused. "The surgeon, the hero, the man she chose to confide in when she should have been confiding. Me?" "Did you confront him?" Harris asked. "No," I admitted, shaking my head. "I confronted her again and again. And every time she turned it back on me, told me I was paranoid, told me I was imagining things. She made me doubt myself until I couldn't tell where the lies ended and the truth began. Ruiz tapped her pen against the table. So you're saying she manipulated you? I closed my eyes. Memories swirled, her voice rising in anger, her tears streaming down her cheeks, her silence when she walked out without explanation. I'm saying, I breathed, that love became a weapon. She wielded it against me until I didn't know who I was anymore. And my chest tightened. I was so desperate to hold on to her that I let it destroy me. The detectives exchanged a glance. Harris scribbled something in his notebook, but I couldn't see what. Daniel, Ruiz pressed, do you feel remorse for what you did? My lips trembled. The word remorse felt too small. Every second, I said finally. Every breath I take without her feels like punishment. I loved her. God help me, I loved her even when I hated her. And now she's gone because of me. Silence stretched. For the first time, they didn't push. They let me sit in the wreckage of my own confession, the weight of it pressing heavier than any chains. Somewhere beyond these walls, the world continued to feast on our tragedy. Headlines painted me a monster. Neighbors whispered my name with disgust, and strangers dissected my marriage as if it were entertainment. But here, under this harsh light, I was just a man unraveling, guilty, grieving, and hollowed out. When Harris finally stood, he gathered his notes and nodded to the guard. That's enough for now. We'll continue tomorrow. The door clanged shut behind them, and I was left alone again, swallowed by shadows. And yet in that darkness, one thought refused to leave me. Adrian Cole still lived freely in the daylight. And somehow, even from the depths of this prison, I knew his part in this story wasn't finished. The world outside my cell devoured our story. I felt it in the way the guards looked at me, in the whispers that trailed after my name when the newspapers slid under the bars each morning. What had once been private, the laughter we shared in the kitchen, the whispered arguments behind our bedroom door, the betrayal I could hardly speak aloud, was now public property. Strangers dissected it as though it were theirs to claim, their voices shaping the legacy of what Emily and I once were. Headlines screamed across front pages, the surgeon, the wife, and the husband who broke. Others were crueler, reducing everything to lurid spectacle. Perfect marriage ends in blood. I read them until the letters blurred, until my chest ached from holding in a scream I couldn't release. Neighbors I once greeted on quiet suburban. Mornings now gave interviews under the glow of camera lights. They seemed so perfect, one woman said, her voice trembling with rehearsed sincerity. You never would have guessed what was happening behind those walls. Another neighbor swore he heard fights for months, but didn't think it was. Serious? Everyone had suddenly become an expert on our love, our downfall, our tragedy. The journalists dug deeper, pulling photographs from wedding albums Emily once showed proudly, splashing them across glossy covers. They froze us in time, the glowing bride and the smiling groom, then placed those images beside crime scene tape and the sterile hallways of a courthouse. It was the contrast that fascinated them most, how beauty could dissolve into horror, how love could rot into violence. Talk shows debated me like I was a character in a play. Some painted me as a monster, a jealous husband who couldn't stand losing control. Others framed me as a victim, manipulated until I shattered. Few, if any, remembered that behind the headlines was a man who once simply wanted to love his wife and be loved in return. But the story was no longer mine. It belonged to everyone else now. The strangers on the street, the reporters on television, the faceless voices in online forums who argued over whether Emily was an angel betrayed or a woman with secrets too sharp to survive. In here I was, given no such luxury of distance. I lived the story every waking second. At night I replayed the moments that led to the breaking point, the late-night whispers, the perfume I didn't recognize, the shadows of Adrian Cole's presence where I once stood as husband. In my dreams, Emily's voice echoed, sometimes tender, sometimes accusing, always just out of reach. Detectives returned, lawyers came and went, but none of them could touch the truth that lived inside me. Love and betrayal were not opposites. They had lived in the same bed, under the same roof, in the same heart. And in the end, both had demanded more from me than I could give. I thought of Emily's smile the day we bought our home, the way sunlight poured through the windows and made her hair shimmer like gold. I thought of her laughter in the kitchen, her hand resting on mine, her promise that we were forever. Those memories felt like ghosts now, untouchable, mocking, yet still alive enough to break me anew each time I closed my eyes. From time to time I overheard the guards discussing the case. It shook the whole country, one of them muttered. A tragedy like this, it sticks with people. And he was right. We had become legend, a cautionary tale whispered in living rooms and classrooms, told with the same fascination as a ghost story. The perfect couple who crumbled, the husband who loved too much, the wife who strayed too far, but legends are cruel. They take the flesh and bone of real people and strip them down to symbols. Emily was no longer Emily. She was the wife. I was no longer Daniel. I was the husband. Our lives, our mistakes, our love, our sins, flattened into archetypes for others to consume. And yet, within me, she remained real. Flesh, voice, scent, laughter. The woman I loved. The woman I lost. The woman whose betrayal and death would echo through me until my last breath. So here I sit, alone in shadows, my story no longer mine, my name no longer mine. They call it a tragedy that shook everyone. But for me, it was something simpler, sharper and crueler. It was love, raw, relentless, unforgiving. It was betrayal, silent, suffocating, inevitable. And it was the choice I made in the heat of both, a choice that cannot be undone. If there is any lesson in my downfall, it is this. Love, when twisted by fear and silence, does not break quietly. It explodes. It consumes. It leaves, behind only ashes. And in those ashes I remain, haunted, hollow, and forever asking myself the one question that will never be answered. Was she worth it?